get stuck in one of them here, you're just going to be left absolutely stuffed, I think, because everyone else gets the best of both all the time.
We're watching Fernando Alonso continuing on around the circuit. Alonso today now running to lap 63 on a long run here. He's been out there for a while. Sam, you've got some thoughts on the Aston Martin?
Yeah, just some observations, really. You can see the car running around the track now. If you look at the cooling exits on the rear bodywork, we'll see it really clearly as we go past the camera now. Those gills at the rear bodywork and those openings. Aston Martin's been playing around with those quite extensively today and also last week. And in the original shakedown, when we first saw the car all painted in black, or not painted at all, those gills weren't present. There was just a solid panel there and then just the rear openings. But Aston Martin consistently since then, with a short exception earlier today, had blanked off those gills, had those gills open, but they blanked them off briefly today, but they've opened them up again. Now, that cooling level, and when you see the car down in the pit lane, it's really open from behind. You can actually see straight into the Honda power unit if you stand behind the Aston Martin, and you get this sort of view we're about to get here. You can just see all of those lovely mechanical gubbins through the back of the car. That's so open. That's the sort of thing you typically see at Mexico City or at the Hungaroring. You don't expect it to see it here in Bahrain. Yes, we're in the middle of the desert. Yes, it's 28 degrees centigrade, but the track temperature is 37.8 right now. That's not incredibly hot by Formula One standards. And yet the car looks to be running an extremely high level of cooling. And that is going to be a big concern for the Aston Martin team, because the more cooling you run, the more drag you generate. Now, you've looked at the Aston Martin. Next time it comes out on track, I'd encourage you to look at the rear end of the Alpine, which barely has any cooling outlets at all. It's a really interesting comparison between those two extremes. The McLaren's quite tight on top of that as well.
So there's good news for Aston Martin in as much as they're running round. We've seen Alonso now 64 laps for the day, circulating. There is bad news for Aston Martin in what I'm seeing, which is a 1 to 2 seconds per lap deficit to Lawson's Racing Bulls effort. Alonso on his first run ran the hard tyre, 16 laps. Lawson ran the medium tyre, 15 laps. They both come through for a pit stop. They're both out now on the hard tyre, new hard tyre. So it appears like they're both doing a race run. There are things that maybe the power unit's turned down from Aston Martin. There might yet be a fuel discrepancy, but there is a big gulf between Aston Martin in terms of lap time on this run and Lawson in the Racing Bulls. Hamilton is on another run. We saw the pit stop that he put in to change. He did exactly the same first length run as Antonelli in the Mercedes. Initially, I thought Hamilton was looking very quick. It was a good run. I think Antonelli's was quicker. Haven't got the full numbers, different tyres. Hamilton's getting on his way now in this second stint of their Grand Prix, but Antonelli, I would say, was a good chunk quicker in the Mercedes.
Getting an idea of the pecking order for Formula One in 2026. Just the remaining 3 hours and 12 minutes today, 8 hours tomorrow, then we're heading to FP1. And any chance of sandbagging, disguising your pace, any chance of making up for lost time, disappearing. Yeah, Aston Martin, against all expectations. You used to be able to drive into Silverstone and totally miss the facility. You wouldn't, if you were looking for it, you'd know it was there, but you could sometimes just drive into the circuit and you wouldn't know there was a Formula One team based just down the road on the right when you go into the main entrance towards what used to be Bridge Corner. Now you absolutely cannot miss it on the way into Aston Martin, building upon building, state-of-the-art facilities, own wind tunnel as well, massive investment that's gone in there, new regulations, and they will obviously improve hand on over fist as they progress through the season, update the car. Fernando Alonso has spoken extensively about the fact that they have total belief that they will eventually have the best chassis, and then all the same, with all of that said, they are still right now trying to find just competitive times around the circuit.
Yeah, I think they're in a battle to not be last in Melbourne with Cadillac, and it's not looking easy. But as you say, and as they say, and we all know, Adrian Newey's joined the team. He has got such an incredible CV. As Fernando says, he's going to find a way to make this car quick, and then it's up to Honda to sort out the PU as well. It's just going to take a bit of time.
team doing their own power unit from scratch. Audi about to release Nico Hülkenberg back into the pit lane. Sam, though, you got a point that we were referencing yesterday in commentary about the Ferrari and the fumes out the back of the Ferrari being visible throughout.
Yeah, I'm sure the question's coming in constantly because it's so visible, the smoke out the back of the Ferrari. Let's see what Liam Lawson's doing first, though.
Turn 10. Oh, something different. Chuck in a bit of variety into turn 10. How about Hülkenberg? There we go, back to a lockup. Oversteering moment for Lawson, caught it. Lock up for Hülkenberg, lock up for Antonelli. So the drivers try to find consistency of braking across multiple laps. It is proving extremely difficult, even by the usual standards of this racetrack. We'll try and pick up the Ferrari for you, Sam, if possible, and have a look at the fumes out of the back. We're watching the outlap of the Audi, but it's noticeable, isn't it, throughout their running?
Yeah, and it's become more noticeable, and since last week it's become notably more noticeable, and I think that's down to this aerodynamic element behind the exhaust tailpipe. Now, every car in this field, the Audi, everybody else, has a oil system breather pipe on top of the rear impact structure. That's where the smoke is coming from on the Ferrari, and notably it's only visible on the works Ferrari and not on the Cadillac and not on the Haas, yet they use the exact same power unit. So this is an aerodynamic thing, not anything to do with the way Ferrari's operating its power unit. These oil system breather pipes have been introduced on the car for years and years and years, and you quite often see the oil system breather sort of vapor coming out of it. But I think that plate has made it just a lot more visible. Here we go. We'll get a good look at it here as Hamilton comes out of the next sequence of corners. We should
good corner for it, Sam.
Absolutely, and you'll see just at the rear of the car, there it is, clear as day, just a few little puffs coming out above that rain light. And what that is it's just a lubricant breather system, and all of the cars very clearly there being dragged up into the air, and that's because of this plate, I think, behind the exhaust. But what used to happen is the breather pipes used to go straight into the combustion chamber of the engine. Now, some teams were apparently putting a bit too much oil into the breather pipes to get a bit more combustible gas into the combustion chamber, which in a fuel flow or energy flow limited formula gives you a little bit more power. But it's a little bit naughty to do that. You're not really meant to get extra power that way. So the FIA looked at this and said, yeah, you're not going to do that anymore. They banned that practice and said you've all got to put your oil system vent pipe out the back of the car. And that's what you can see at the back of the Ferrari. The question now is an aerodynamic one. Why is it so much more visible on the Ferrari? And I think it is, as I say, down to that weird plate behind the exhaust.
Fernando Alonso has come to a stop. You can see the new warning lights on the wing mirrors illuminating, and Fernando Alonso's race run has been halted. Aston Martin again having a tough moment in a pre-season full of them, and he comes to a halt on the exit of turn number 4 to bring out the yellow flag initially, and two-time world champion out of the car, and his running interrupted.
I gave the good news with the bad news a moment ago, but the good news has turned into bad news as well. He's no longer out there running. It just gets worse for Aston Martin. It's got to be just so much concern. I think they're embracing it, the team, how tough this start of the season is going to be. For a 44-year-old turning 45 in the summer, in the hopes of fighting for another title, they seem distant right now, to say the least.
25 laps for Fernando Alonso in that run. Had a racing pit stop in between as well.
It's shades of his McLaren Honda stint right now, isn't it?
Oh, I hope not, but you're absolutely
Unfortunately,
right.
you have to draw the comparison. Let's have a listen in. It's gone early, hasn't it? He's on the radio through turns 1 and 2.
That is the end of his race run simulation, Sam.
I've got two observations. That first one you can see on screen. I think Alonso's got a special fairing on his helmet to elongate it a bit more. I don't remember them running that last year, so I think they've changed that just for aero reasons. You can see on top of his head there quite clearly. Also, listening to that, and I'm sure Jolien can add in on this, that rev and lack of drive to the rear wheel says to me quite clearly that's something in the transmission that's gone crunch and isn't working very well at all. It sounds like a drive shaft or the clutch or the gearbox itself has failed. It doesn't sound like the power unit has actually had an issue, because you could hear it quite clearly revving away very freely. Honda clearly has got the revs, but it can't transmit them to the rear wheels.
Yeah, I think he's felt something on the way into turn one. He's straight away got on the radio, as you would, and said, well, what's going on? And then he's carried on, backed off, bearing in mind he was on a race run, backed off it, and then it's obviously gone clunk, and he's got a load of revs with no drive. Bearing in mind Lance Stroll had his strange spin yesterday. Aston Martin manufacturing their own gearbox for this year.
Yeah.
They've gone away from taking the Mercedes gearbox. They've not got a Mercedes power unit. It's all in-house, and it's another headache for them. Power unit, gearbox, chassis. The headaches are everywhere.
Fernando Alonso by the side of the track and not competing more laps behind the wheel of his Aston Martin, as the team had hoped that would be the case. Driver who Adrian Newey said he wanted to work with. Hadn't worked with Lewis Hamilton, hadn't worked with Fernando Alonso. The move to Aston Martin enabling that to happen, but a combination of factors at the moment limiting their testing running. And you say it's reminiscent of his stint with McLaren Honda when he tried to, and he hoped that he'd be able to enjoy the glory days that those two brands had enjoyed in the past. Just didn't work out.
So that was 2015 when Honda came back. They were a year late to the regs and to the hybrid engines. So McLaren went from Mercedes to Honda, much like Aston Martin are going from Mercedes to Honda. This time Honda are here for the start of the new regulations, but they are admittedly a little bit on the back foot, because they dwindled down their program with Red Bull, and then realised they actually do want to stay in with this new generation of car. It famously didn't go well. I'm not going to repeat the quotes that came out at the time, but they are very repeatable. Fernando not getting on so well with McLaren and Honda at the time. He's since patched up those relationships, and here he is driving an Aston Martin Honda. Underpowered, poor reliability, heads no performance and no mileage to try and get on top of it with the issues, and he was left fighting me in 2016 and 2017, which I don't think is the aim of a double world champion, to be frank.
I didn't know where that was going, but I didn't think it would go in that direction.
But hey, let's try and put a little positive spin on it for Aston Martin. The 10-year plan, if they'd have stayed at it, McLaren and Honda, in the 10-year cycle, Honda became multiple champions with Red Bull, and hey presto, McLaren became champions as well. Maybe it was a partnership that needed time, like Aston Martin Honda right now will surely need time. They both did in the end pick up the titles, but it was a long old slog from those 2015, 2016 years.
Yeah, it really was, and Fernando Alonso's talent wasn't able to be on display until he returned to the team that he took to 8 podiums. Fantastic to see him back in battling, memorable drag race to the line with Sergio Perez in Brazil. Just an old master back at the wheel and back in the mix. Had a chance to win the Monaco Grand Prix if a strategic decision had gone the other way. And the hopes of similar appearances this year are long gone, even though it's day 2 of test 2, and there is his car static. It means their rate of improvement will be rapid across the course of this year. It is a season that ends in December. There's a long time to go in Formula 1 2026, but really tough moments. The red flag was out. All the cars come back to the pit. We await message from race control about when we'll get things back underway again. Apologies to Bernie Collins, who was standing by trackside to give us to the appearance of what was going on at turns 1 and 2. Sorry about that, Bernie. We were coming to you, and then the Aston Martin coming to a halt.
No one's going near that car, which lays stricken on the side of the road.
There's Fernando walking back to the garage. Sam, no one going near the car.
Yeah, there's one clear reason for that. You could see the lights were still flashing on the car long after Fernando had departed in his Mustang. The reason the lights were flashing is that the car's still energized, which means there's still charge in the battery, the hybrid system is probably still energized, and in those situations, you can't go near and just touch the car. That you need to have special procedures. You need to, and here you see the team members are coming out. They're putting on what we call the marigolds. They look like washing up gloves, and that's essentially what they are. That's to insulate the mechanic or whoever's going to touch the car from the battery system. You can still see the lights on it are flashing, and Aston Martin mechanics have come out to recover it because they've had the training to be able to touch the car when it's still considered in a hot situation. You might sometimes see it in the garage where they put the yellow tape across the front of the garage to stop you wandering in when the car's still fired up. The light on the roll hoop is green, which generally means it's probably okay to touch, but you can still see the lights flashing. The car's still powered up, so they're not taking any risks, taking all the precautions, putting the safety gloves on, and then they'll touch the car and be able to switch it off and discharge it, and then it'll all be a bit safe. So that's why no one's going near the cars. The marshals do have the marigolds. You can see one wearing them, but I think Aston Martin have said, yeah, it's probably a bit safer if we do it, lads, and we'll just let us come out and do it, and that's what's going on. And they'll eventually bring this car back to the pits and fiddle with it some more.
Are they not the yellow flag lights that are going on the wing mirrors there?
No, those lights that flash like that come on when the car goes below a certain speed. So I think it's below 10 kph or something like that. The lights will come on, which is why you see all those lights flashing on the start-finish line on a practice start. It's a new safety system that those lights come on if the car... It's almost like a hazard light. If you're driving down the straight, driving along the motorway and there's been some sudden slowdown, you put the hazard lights on like that. They just come on automatically now on these cars. So that's why those are on. They won't come on every time there's a yellow flag, but I think if you do get a sudden deceleration, you may get that light functionality. One thing that is coming up a lot is there is new functionality on all of the lights on the car, particularly the rain light at the back and the lights on the rear wing. The different flashes mean different things, and we're going to be taking a look at that a little bit later, probably closer to Melbourne, about how all of those lights flash and what it all means.
So, finally, Sam, our diagnostics here are changing, aren't they, from this being a sort of simple gearbox issue to something a little bit more severe?
Yeah, the fact that we're seeing this, the hybrid system, the KERS marigolds going on, the lights still flashing on the car, would say...
This has got to be linked to PU now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, but we did hear... The combustion engine clearly was still working when the car stopped, so if it is something like that, it could be a hybrid system fault linked to the transmission of the car, but they're still really not keen to go too near it, so they're phoning in whatever the car's telling them to work out what they can do. So really not wanting to get too close, and some panels now coming off the car to possibly be able to manually switch the thing off and make it safe, but they don't want to get too close to it. And again, yeah, you're right, it's clearly now something related to the power unit. Is it still related to the transmission? Not sure. Don't think it's the combustion engine though.
So honestly, these guys, I've seen this happen for years, where the marigolds come out and the car's not in safe mode. So as Sam says, even in the garage, you have that fair play, because if someone gave me some marigolds and were like, touch this now, it's fine. Someone else try it first, please.
Whilst they inspect the Aston Martin, let's go on board with the fastest lap of the test so far with Max Verstappen.
So, having that oversteer, we actually caught that off board initially on the as he was doing it live. That oversteer, he's in a low gear, and then he's holding that gear as well, crawling over the curbs as they're all starting to abuse now. And again, low gear through turn 8. So I think he's down to first there. Let's listen into this. Listen how quickly he's short shifting there. So really using low gears towards an apex, trying to get that recharge. It's putting more emphasis on the rear axle. Neat and tidy, but the gear usage still for the Red Bull is eye-catching compared to everyone else.
Yeah, Max Verstappen going a different way very early on in the test last week. Then other drivers tried it. Some have stuck with it, some have not. Verstappen finding a different route to performance for others. Ford and Red Bull doing their own power unit with an extensive regulation change. And conversation between Jos, Max and GP. Many reports linking GP away from the role that he is held for a long time, but he remains in the garage and remains in conversation. We spoke to Isaac Hadjar earlier on. We're going to speak to another driver, Ollie Bearman. Hopefully he can hear us. He is on the pit wall, I believe, at this moment. Ollie, can you hear us loud and clear?
Radio check.
Yeah, here we go. Great to speak to you, sir. How has your experience of Formula One in 2026 been so far?
It's certainly been interesting. First of all, happy to be back on track. That's really nice. Yeah, it's been really nice to be back on track. The test in Barcelona was one thing, but now, you know, we're in quite representative conditions here with the weather. So it's been positive.
You've been busy out there, Ollie. Talk us through driving these new cars from your perspective.
I mean, yeah, it's a bit of a change, that's for sure. First thing, you know, we have less downforce than what we've been used to over the years. So that's really the first thing to get used to. But the biggest difference is, of course, the power and the way that you deploy the power across the lap. So on corner exit, you have an incredible amount of power. At the end of the straight, you also have an incredible amount of power, but in the other direction. So it's interesting. You really have to drive consciously at this stage. It doesn't really make total sense yet, but that's because we've been used to this one way of doing things, and obviously the new way is not going to feel natural after having driven the car for 3 days.
Have you got a feeling of when it might start to feel natural? Are you already in your days in the car starting to understand the feeling of the cars, the way that you've got to drive them?
Yeah, and you know, this track is one of the ones where the delta between last year and this year is smaller, you know, because it's quite easy to recharge the energy around here. So particularly on the quali lap, but even on the consecutive laps, you know, it's not a crazy amount of derating, it's not a crazy amount of clipping compared to what we might experience in say Melbourne, just because, you know, we are recharging in the braking zones and there are plenty of them around here. So it's not been a huge difference here. I expect it to feel bigger at some other circuits. But, you know, coming into this test and having had a few days to kind of go away from the track and consolidate everything that we've learned, I've already felt a bit more at home and a bit more natural getting back in the car this week.
Ollie, just wondering, the second half of the season that you had last year, would you have preferred maybe the regulation set to extend by 1 year so that you could put all that you learned in your rookie season to effect for a second campaign? Or are you happy to get the reset that everyone's got, try and build for your second full year in the sport?
Yeah, I mean, it's not up to me at the end. What I would have liked is probably a continuation, but I'm really happy that I finished in you know, my best form was at the end of the year. That's super positive, and you know, it's not that everything I learned last year is thrown away. It's still incredibly useful, and I'm even finding that now, myself now compared to myself 12 months ago. I'm so much more aware of what's going on, and I have a much clearer idea. So that's really positive.
And you still got another half day in the car tomorrow to try and get onto final terms. But the big question is, where are Haas going to stack up? A lot of people are saying good things. The car looks good out there. Where do you reckon you are?
I think we're at least in the top two. You know,
yeah.
maybe second or third. No, I wish. No, it's super clear that the top four teams are a decent chunk ahead of the rest of us. That was clear already from Barcelona. In terms of where do we stack up to our hopefully our competition, it's a bit more challenging to understand. The gaps are very close, that's for sure, but it always depends on fuel load, engine mode, and obviously the recovery is a huge thing, and a huge variable as well. So we hope that we come out on the right side of it. There's no guarantees until really we get in the car in Australia, but I'm feeling hopeful, and we're learning a lot about this car, and I think the main thing is to continue to focus on ourselves, try to extract all of the performance we can from this car, and if we do that, then I hope that we'll be in a good place in 2 weeks' time.
Points in Melbourne.
Podium in Melbourne.
Yeah, we love it.
We're going to have to let you go, Ollie. We appreciate your time, mainly for the state of your thumb, mashing that button, speaking to us the entire time.
Yeah,
Thank you so
arm
much.
is tired. It's I prefer driving, that's for sure.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
we'll
guys.
speak to you throughout the season. Ollie Behrman, preparing for his second full season in Formula One. Lovely, healthy dollop of British sarcasm chucked in there with his feedback about how things were going.
And they don't talk enough, I think, the drivers, about appreciating the physicality you need to commentate. It is tough, you know, holding the microphone, making sure you're on air at times. There's too much about this drivers need to be fit stuff, but it's rigorous, our training routine as well, isn't it?
Joining us in the com box is Lawrence Barretto. Lawrence, great to have you back up here. Palmer's changed his tune from his driving days.
Yeah, very much so. I got to spend a bit of time with you, Jolien, when I was on the media side and you were on the driving side, and you definitely changed your tune.
I had no appreciation for the media back then, you know. All the appreciation in the world now.
You always enjoyed your pen interviews, didn't you?
Famously.
You always, to be fair, Jolien, you were always a pleasure to interview in the TV pen. Good day or bad day.
Can you tell another couple of people in our team that? Because someone told me just earlier today that I was a diva when I was a driver, and that's not how I live my memories. But apparently, I was.
For what it's worth, one of the most respected members of the TV community.
Credentials are now in question after that.
Like an all-timer, I'd say. Like, there's not a producer Hall of Fame, but if there was, she'd be in it. Diva Jolien Palmer.
I don't believe
it. Depends who was asking the questions, I believe. Yeah. Barretto's silky smooth style, never riling the Palmer.
I don't think you ever turned down an interview with me, Jolien, so I'll take that.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you. Saving my good name.
2 hours, 48 minutes. Crofty and Ant taking you through the final 2 hours of the session. Jolien Palmer, Lawrence Barretto, I'm Alex Jakes. We're going through the laps with Lewis Hamilton back out there with the green light back at the end of the pit lane. The Aston Martin recovered eventually. They took their time. A bit of an unusual sight, the joy of broadcasting live testing. You get to see a testing recovery compared to the marshals just pushing it back behind. Aston Martin will be able to receive that car on the back of the flatbed truck and try and diagnose what interrupted Fernando Alonso's Grand Prix simulation.
And it was a bit annoying for Hamilton as well, who was in the middle of a second stint of a long run. Obviously, Alonso is going to be the most frustrated, but beyond that, Hamilton needs a lot of laps today, and any stoppage there is going to be not ideal. It wasn't the shortest, was it? Lawson as well was on a long run. Piastri was on a long run of sorts as well. All straight back out there getting on with it. So we've lost our Lawson versus Alonso comparison, but I think Lawson won that hands down.
Alex Albon watching on as well, currently at the telemetry bay of the garage. Albon, who across the course of the day has done 71 laps, if you're one of our newer viewers, 57 laps for the Grand Prix distance in Bahrain.
Long lunch for Williams, isn't it? Hasn't been out since lunch, I believe. Albon, the only Williams driver in the car today.
Running all day. Lawrence, you were conducting the press conferences once again earlier on. Kimi Antonelli has gone up to third personal best for him, 22 laps on the board for the Italian driver. What were the standout moments for you conducting that? And not always the easiest job.
Not always the easiest job, but a fun one nonetheless. Fred Vasseur was quite keen to get the press conference done and dusted because obviously Ferrari spent very little time out on track this morning. And he didn't want to be pulled away from the engineering briefings to understand what he described as a small issue, but one which obviously limited them to just 5 laps this morning. They had that new component on the car that's caught everyone's attention, but aside from what's going on at testing, there's parts going out to Australia, he was saying today. The engine's getting boxed up in a couple of days. There's just a lot of like logistical stuff that, you know, a team principal's got to be having oversight over, and that was his kind of focus at the minute, and he probably wasn't as keen to be talking to the media, and more specifically me, at the time. But obviously he'll be happy to have seen that Lewis is out on track up to 35 laps at the minute. And aside from that kind of issue that they had, generally speaking, it's been a very good test for Ferrari. I think the mood in the team has been really positive. I think the way they're carrying themselves has been really encouraging. And I think there is, while he points to the Silver Arrows, Mercedes and McLaren as genuine rivals, I think they do believe they're really very much in the mix to be fighting for proper silverware from the off.
Would be a big turnaround for the team that had a chastening end to the 2025 season.
More and more people starting to suggest that Ferrari and Mercedes are maybe a breakaway two of the big four. Zach Brown was one, wasn't he? Said the red and the Silver Arrows are maybe slightly ahead. McLaren have looked good as well, but I've had that from a few teams now starting to think that Red Bull, good. Obviously, Max is top of the times, but still with a little bit to unlock. And the Ferrari and Mercedes are the two threats.
Yeah, I think for me, for the top four, Red Bull seem to be a little bit more, it's a bit more uncertain where Red Bull stand, but I do think more and more people are putting McLaren in P4. I think they obviously had that tough push towards the end of last year, fighting for the Drivers' Championship right until the last race. I think a lot of their focus was making sure they defended that Constructors' title as well. And they are an independent team who don't have the benefit of having in-house power unit where they can have that kind of integration from the very blank sheet of paper that they have when they're creating a design. So I think there will be some areas where they're lacking relative to a Mercedes or a Ferrari.
Max Verstappen with the fastest time so far, with a 1:33.162. So at the exact moment that Oscar Piastri was setting his personal best, which is a 1:33.624. Max Verstappen now up to 71 laps for the day. Oscar Piastri only in the car for the second session of the day on 16 laps. But Verstappen setting that time on the C3 tyre as well.
Yeah, Piastri's time on the C2 is a good lap. For what it's worth, when you consider Verstappen's just done the best lap of the test there, they're both finding a bit of time. Antonelli now gets on with what looks to be a low fuel run for him, having done a good few laps on high fuel, a 13-lap stint, and then stopped with Alonso's red flag, and now he's back in straight into low fuel on an out lap, so we'll keep an eye in case he's going to do another fast one coming up.
This is Max Verstappen with the new fastest lap. We go on board with him to turn number one.
Gears come so quickly on the exit. I think he's at the first. He's in fourth by the time he flicks it left towards turn two. Builds it more again into turn four. I mean, the car's starting to look a lot more planted. Throughout the high speed, again, even more curb this time on the way into turn 8. But they're finding balance through that high speed section at 5 and 6. Quite an aggressive turn-in approach, missing that first apex at 9 in a slightly wider way than a lot of others. Again, drilling it up the gears because they've used so much engine braking on the way in with the Red Bull. Listen for the short shift. So he's a gear up this time, I think, on what he had before, where he was really low on the gears through a higher speed corner. There's a short shift out of 13 as well, so there's the same tendency, again, using the gears to slow this car down, making it a little bit pointy, but they've managed to settle the rear, so it's not overly lively. And there we go, just a little bit of a check on the throttle on the exit of the final turn. As he got deployment right to the line, I think there might have even been a slight hesitation there right the way to the end of the lap, as that was a full deployment lap there for Verstappen. Also, didn't sound like he was having to do any level of lifting coast or super clip, as they call it, derate in towards turn 1. He had quite good deployment there, it seemed, from the start of the lap there on a flyer.
A 1:33.162 for Max Verstappen. We've seen it trackside. We've had an onboard, and Verstappen attacking the racetrack from the look of the camera. And with Flovis on the side of the car as well. You can see the gap to the best time set on the C4 tyre from Lando Norris earlier on for McLaren.
He keeps chipping away at his lap time. We get another Max lap to look at. It's a little bit like, do you know Mondo Duplantis, the pole vaulter? Just keeps breaking records.
Always enjoy that. Just a tiny increment every single time. Celebrate the world record. Unbelievable ability that he's got.
And the prize money that goes with it every time you break a world record.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
He's got a business brain on him.
The expectation's incredibly high, though. If you go and see an event where he's competing, you're like, well, I want to see the world record. And eventually he's going to reach the limit of what is possible.
Imagine when he just doesn't get one.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to go and see the track and field today.
Yeah. You've won it. You're 30 centimetres clear of second place. But I didn't get a world record. What disappointment.
Sensational athlete. And a good advantage and a good example of what potentially Max Verstappen is doing. We're heading down to turn number 1 once again. Let's listen in.
Just having to check the throttle through turn 2 and then squeeze it on through 3. There was a little bit of a energy harvest that time, about 10 metres or so before hitting the brakes, where the power unit just held back, and it shows that he's a fair way away, probably missing the peak of the tyre, but also not quite having the deployment, I think, that he had on the last lap. I would say the Red Bull, Max has got the fastest first sector by a reasonable chunk. Lando Norris still has the best second and third sector that we've seen from his lap earlier on, and I think that the Red Bull in a straight line does seem to be shifting very well. It's what Toto Wolff said at the end of last week. They're up the road in terms of their energy deployment and their recharging, and the sector times sort of continually seem to show that their most competitive sector is the first sector. It was the same with Isaac Hadjar yesterday. Wasn't to the top of the times, but he was more competitive at the start of the lap than he was in the middle. And the same with Verstappen now. His first sector is very good. Middle sector's okay, and the third sector comes back again towards the Red Bull.
Let's finish the lap on board with the 4-time world champion. 2 points away from making it 5 last year. Whittled away that advantage. Crosses the line.
Stay with it, go on.
Can we get the move down into turn number 1? Yeah, you already knew the answer to that question. Through goes Verstappen.
Never in doubt. Franco Colapinto dispatched.
And on a personal best, Sector 1, Sector 2. Audi's Nico Hülkenberg C4 tyre moves up to 5th position, and it's a 1:33.987. He's just roared past the location of Ruth Buscombe, who's down at Mercedes.
Race sim time. Now, what's a race sim? Race simulation, we've done that. But what makes a race sim a bit special? Well, we're trying to test absolutely everything. And I think we've currently got pretty much all of the big four coming out. We've got strategist heading to a pit wall, which means we're just about to have a pit stop. Now, why do I know that? Well, pit boards are a key part of any race simulation. We've got rear wings that flop 270 degrees. We've got brand new power units, but we still use the good old-fashioned pit board. Now, some teams like to count up, other teams like to count down. Mercedes, they like to count down, and we've got lap 6, which means there's 6 laps left of that current run. We do that in case we ever have a radio failure to our drivers on track. We're able to communicate things to them. In Formula 1 races, we have a whole host of things that we can say to them with their specific letters and numbers. Either what lap of the race we're currently on, what's the gap to the car in front, what position you're on, and of course, my personal favourite, which you very rarely get to use if you're the head of strategy for the team that I was, but the ones they repurpose them for the celebrations at the end of the race.
Thank you, Ruth. Details down there in the pit lane, trying to bring you every detail possible, and it can go in all sorts of directions when it comes to testing. Max Verstappen has the fastest time so far. We showed you on board with a 1:33.162. Towards the bottom end of the timing tower, you can see the Cadillac team with the experienced racers Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas in the car. Their team principal's been talking about the state the team is in as they begin life in Formula One, Lawrence.
Yeah, I think that we've kind of seen how good a job really Cadillac have done to get themselves here looking like a very professional team. Their race car looks very tidy. Pat Simmons was saying there's a few details on that car that he said other designers come to him and said, look, you know, good job, massive respect, but let's not forget, as Graham Loudon reminded me in the presser today, yes, it was day 9, today is day 10 of Cadillac's history in Formula One. And look, they had a bumpy day yesterday. They had a fair few different issues, you know, loss of telemetry, sensor issues, and that's held them back. And it hasn't been super smooth sailing for them either today. I think maybe something to point out though is that they're doing a pretty good job of always getting back out, you know, so when they've got an issue, they're not in the garage for hours on end trying to understand what's going on. They're just fixing the niggles and getting back out. And look, of course they're going to be on the back foot. They don't have any of the reams of data that they've had for years and years that other teams have got. They're starting essentially from scratch, and so they've got a lot of work ahead of them. But I think the way they handle themselves is really impressive.
Yeah, it's a very difficult task to get up to speed in Formula One. We'll touch on that again in a moment. Let's go downstairs to Ruth in the pit lane as they recover Fernando Alonso's Aston Martin.
Yep, so another team that's having a bit of trouble today is that Aston Martin. And one thing you only really see in winter testing is what I'm seeing in front, which is whilst the session is still going, the car is being wheeled back. Now, you are allowed to cover that car up, and you've got those mechanics pushing them back. They still actually have their gloves on. Now, that isn't necessarily that the car is unsafe. It is always just an actual precaution as they're pushing them down. And then another precaution, flags. We love flags. I'm a big fan of flags myself, including this yellow waved flag that we've got the marshals showing, which is at any point that we have anybody doing anything down the pit lane, we do that in a way to make sure in case someone is boxing into the pit lane, they're able to see what's going on. So yeah, it does mean that they get a head start on fixing that Aston Martin. Hopefully they can get it out by the end of the session. Every team is going to be focused on power hour, or power hour and a half really, between 5:30 and 7 p.m. as the sun sets and we hit the absolute optimum conditions ahead of the final day of testing tomorrow. They're going to be the most important 3 hours before we hit the track in Melbourne, most representative of race conditions. No one's going to want to miss a minute of that running.
Thank you, Ruth.
Another lockup for the Mercedes.
They're treating turn 10 as optional this week.
They really are. It does seem to be particularly turn 10 for the Mercedes. We've seen Russell have quite a few lockups. Antonelli now has had a few as well. I wonder if it speaks to the stiffness of the car, maybe lacking compliance when you're coming through 9 loaded up into 10. You're unloading that left front. And I know we're seeing a lot of lockups from everyone, but we're not seeing too many from the Mercedes in other corners, the big braking zones. So we're seeing a lot of it in turn 10. And yeah, so I'm wondering if that's maybe now a setup thing as much as anything else for that car, which is clearly working pretty well. But is that a slight trade-off where they're missing a little bit of compliance, mechanical grip? They were certainly changing the front end mechanically earlier on in the day, making general setup sweeps in the first hours, but that's all sort of things they'll be finding out to try and find a balance between sort of peak grip and downforce and having your tyres in perfect contact with the circuit, being able to ride the curbs, being able to ride the bumps, and having sort of braking and turning, all these twistier sections where it's not just high speed planted. They'll do well, by the way, to get that Aston Martin out again in 2.5 hours.
Yeah, tough moment for the team, more mileage lost. You are looking at the moment with Franco Colapinto, who when he joined Formula One mid-season became the first Argentine driver to occupy a space on the grid since Gaston Mazzacane. A little bit of trivia for you because it's testing, and why not? The team that he made his debut with, Lawrence, Williams, and Williams' Carlos Sainz has been talking to you about where they find... We asked Ollie Behrman a couple of moments ago where we thought Haas sat in the competitive order, and Carlos was giving you a similar opinion in the presser earlier.
Yeah, I think the positive side of things for Williams is that they've clawed back some mileage that they lost in Barcelona. I think the downside is you just can't recapture lost time, and I think as they make progress, everyone else is making progress, and there's been a number of things that the team want to work on, but they're realising they're running out of time to work on them before the first race of the season. So understandably, he accepts that they are going to be behind on a number of things heading into Australia, which means they're going to head in knowing there's going to be some unknowns. But Alex Albon's obviously spent a fair bit of time now in the garage. The team just told me that they should be out in about 10 minutes or so. They've been making a few adjustments, but this massive loss of track time is just another example of when you lose running like they did in Barcelona, and then you have these little niggles when it comes to the sunny conditions of Bahrain. It hurts you doubly, I think, to lose out on that. So, you know, while Williams are recovering, it does kind of feel like they're on the back foot. And just talking to some teams up and down the paddock earlier today, I think there's a feeling that maybe they are going to be kind of towards the back of that midfield to start with. There's a lot of chatter that the car's a little bit overweight, and that's going to hurt them in the early phase, and whether or not it's going to take a bit of time, I think, to bring some upgrades to the car, and they might be waiting a little bit longer because of those production delays. So it could potentially be a very difficult start to the year for Williams.
I think the team are braced for it, aren't they? They're not quite Aston Martin. They have the Mercedes PU. That's going to be a big head start for them as a customer team compared to the likes of Aston Martin and Audi as well, building up from their own PU product. But certainly Williams thinking that this is not about to be a quick magic jump towards the front of the field. And as we've been told by Ollie Behrman earlier on, there does seem to be a pretty clear four that are ahead of the game. Checo's out on circuit. You mentioned Gaston Mazzacani and obviously Franco Colapinto. You got any other Argentine drivers in the locker?
Well, we had the great one, Manuel Fangio, five-time
Indeed.
champion. Carlos Reutemann, fantastic driver for Williams. Going for any others?
Esteban Tuero.
I knew you were going to come out with Esteban Tuero, cult hero of the late 1990s with Minardi. Very young as well. Very young. Sometimes got mentioned in the same brackets when Max Verstappen was performing heroics. He'd be listed in, you know, debuts of young drivers and appearances on the grid.
In very early, and did he had 1 year, I think.
That was it.
And that was
98 and goodbye.
him in and out. But yeah, in very, very young.
It's testing. There's gonna
Lawrence,
be
have you got any more in the locker? One more. I don't know that there is. I'm just.
No, you put me on the spot.
Here goes Checo.
Let's listen on board with Checo. No, okay, fine. The old testing tactics. Sector 1, Sector 2 personal best. His best lap of the day did not include a personal best. Palmer's entering his quiz half hour. The reward if you make it to the final half hour of our stint. Headlines so far from this section of this session. Lando Norris running earlier with the time that was at the top, was beaten by Max Verstappen, who did a 1:33.162. Oscar Piastri running this afternoon, done a 1:33.624. First efforts, very, very similar time set on track. In terms of reliability, another halt for Aston Martin. We have not seen Alex Albon back out onto the circuit either. We appreciate Isaac Hadjar, Oliver Behrman joining us on the broadcast and telling us their opinions if you're watching. And you can spool back. They were talking to us a couple of hours ago, and good to hear from both of them. Have I bought you enough time, Jolien?
Did you not write a book about 75 years of Formula One?
Oh, here we go.
And you're missing Jose Froilan Gonzalez.
First driver to win for Ferrari.
There we go.
Yeah, indeed, I did, but it was in a hurry. I'll say that much.
2 Grand Prix wins for another Argentine, Jose Froilan Gonzalez, and in my lifetime, we have another one, which will be in both of your lifetimes as well. Then Norberto Fontana. 4 Grand Prix starts that he made in 1997 for Sauber, indeed.
Got in the way of the title battle, didn't he? in Jerez. That's my reference to him. Thank you for dragging a chapter of my book, Jolien. I appreciate that.
A few others as well, as a connoisseur of 75 years of F1 that have slipped under the radar.
That's why I didn't ask you for a quote.
We don't need to go through them all.
Okay, constant speed test for Kimi Antonelli. And he's completed that at 75 miles an hour, up to the next stage. It looks like an issue, but he's just going through the various modes requested by the team. Things that we normally point out extensively to you. But there's been so much to talk about with these new regulations. The classic straight line, it gets out of the way there of the run for Checo behind.
Onofre Marimon.
Now that is a new name.
Yeah, a couple of podiums in the 1950s. The Argentines were huge in F1 in the 50s, weren't they? Knocking up first wins for Ferraris, becoming the all-time GOAT of the time, and still in the conversation based on that. Big in the 50s. Will they be big in the 2026s?
A little bit of it looked like dry ice. It can't be gravel, the part of the circuit heading into turn 14 on the racing line. It's slightly unusual. It had Oscar Piastri on an out lap, but yeah, a little bit of debris occupying the racing line into turn 14, and a launch just a test for Kimi Antonelli. He will be pushed back into the garage, and seems promising for Alex Albon to emerge out onto the circuit.
Testing the active aero on the car. Front wing flap, I'm sure, moved. Mechanics all looking around it. Alex waiting for the go-ahead. Eager to get back out there. Oh, it's so painful when you're just sitting in the car waiting to continue your program. Did look like he was maybe about to be released there. Good afternoon so far for Hulkenberg. Extracting some pace. Obviously, performance running, taking the fuel out of the car, I'm sure. Running a C4 tyre. He's good around here as well, Nico. And able to jump up into the top 5, showing a little bit more of Audi's hand, which is more promising. Naturally, when a team does a good lap time, we all start to think, oh, maybe they're okay. It is testing. They're all capable of getting down to a sensible pace, or they should be at some point. But then the benchmark can go on if the front runners so wish, you'd have thought. But certainly Hulkenberg will be a little bit happier with that.
I think when Audi brought the upgraded package to the Bahrain test last week, Nico Hulkenberg was already saying that the car felt much better, that they made a step. They'd been quite keen to kind of go under the radar, I think. And Jonathan Wheatley, when he was talking in the press conference yesterday, was like, you know, we're kind of plodding along, making progress, but we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
What's going on? Is this a power hour? What's happening?
Don't tell Crofty. We're sneaking it in the last 20 minutes of our stint.
We had a word in the paddock. We appreciate it. Look at this speed for Oscar Piastri on the C3 tyre.
So when we rode on board with Norris earlier on, Lando was fighting oversteer a lot on corner entries. This looks like a car. He's having a bit of a harvest into the final corner. Derating. Is he going to have power all the way to the line here? Yeah, picking up the speed he has. So keeps a good lap all the way through. I wasn't sure if he was going to be running out of juice for the end of the lap there. When we jumped on board with Lando, it was fighting oversteer. That looked like a car that was really planted on the limit of maybe understeer there. So what it tells me that McLaren are fairly dialed in with a neutral balance. That, you know, they're shifting it. The drivers are obviously finding a preference and tweaking the setup to get there. If anything, that looked like maybe it could have done with a bit more front end on the way in, because that turn 13 at the top of the hill, there was a big snap of oversteer, but that came from the understeer entry. So he had a load of steering lock still on as the power kicked in.
Piastri losing a bit of time in the third and final sector with a wide moment at turn 13, his first corner in that final sector.
So, you know, I wonder if the way that he had the derate, so the bit of clipping into the final corner, is because he had a spike, as he had the big oversteer on the power. Some of the drivers have been mentioning, if you have a big oversteer, it basically uses extra energy from the battery. They're very energy sensitive, so maybe that made a difference. If you had perfect execution of the traction, possibly that would have just launched him all the way to the final turn. And so it could be a double effect of having wheel spin. You lose the traction, but you also drain the battery a little bit quicker as well. And there was a noticeable 100 meters or something as the power just tapered off from the MG UK.
We saw Alex Albon ready and waiting to join the action. He has done so now. with the C3 tyre on the car. Piastri with the fastest lap of the day. Delighted to bring that to you live, and you saw that it was clean all the way through until the final sector of the racetrack. So a little bit more time in the McLaren there as well, beating the effort for Max Verstappen by 0.3 of a second. And let's cut away from Alex Albon and go downstairs to Bernie Collins in the pit lane.
Yes, hello. So I've made it back to the pit lane. I just wanted to quickly talk through what happens as a car comes in at the end of the run. You can see Piastri here. The mechanics have put fans in the side of both engine covers in the front brake ducts. They do a quick turn around of the wheel. That's just to get some air flowing. You can see now on the right-hand side of the car, the left as we look at it, the fuel line's going in to refuel that car. The tyres are already off in the time we're talking about it. There's a little adjustment happening at the very front wing, and the new set of wheels are coming on. So if I was to guess, just from watching this McLaren, they're practicing their qualifying turnaround. So this is what happens as the car comes into the garage. Very quickly, old wheels off, new wheels on, get everything back down to the right temperature, get the front wing adjusted to where it needs to be, get the new fuel in. The guys already finished, I think, putting the fuel in, so the fuel lines are already disconnected on the back of that car. The data line is connected on the right-hand side in order to get the data off the car, and you can see Tom Stallard, the engineer, with his hand up, ready to hold the car, ready to go again. So that is how quickly in qualifying they can turn around a car from coming in, new tyres, new fuel, right front wing, quick look at the data, get the car ready to go out again. So a really good example from McLaren there, practicing how quickly they can get the car turned around in a qualifying situation and get the driver back out again. A bit of a hold now in the garage. What they'll be waiting for is just a nice traffic gap on track. So Tom Stallard or the strategy engineers will be looking at the track, see which gap they want to release them into, but the car is all ready to go. So in qualifying, they're targeting roughly 30 to 45 seconds to turn around the car from its stops in the pit box to get it ready to go again. So super impressive to see all the guys at their individual job in that crew get the car ready. Blankets now coming off, number one mechanic walking backwards, releasing out into the pit lane, and he's gone. Super impressive. I love watching the qualifying turnarounds of these cars because everyone has a role, everyone knows what they're doing, and that car will go out in exactly the state that they're expecting to get another quali lap on. So I think quali sims happening from McLaren. Really lovely to be able to share that with you. That's all from me, so back to you guys in the comms box.
Thank you, Bernie. Sorry about earlier. Aston Martin had other plans. So we're going to get a trackside here. Bernie's made her way to the pit lane and give us an update. And it's wonderful just to go through every detail possible, including the role, every single person playing a role as they get into the intensity of the season coming up and into these quali simulations as well. We're tracking Franco Colapinto in your picture at the moment. His best time today set on the C3 tyre. And the Argentine driver currently on lap 78 of his day so far.
So that's the prototype tyre that Piastri left on, but that has proven to be a pretty quick tyre as well. So there could be another chance for Oscar to start doing his own Mondo Duplantis effort and nudging down his best lap time. With a 3/10 gap now to Max, who's been in the pits for a while.
Just while we've got Franco Colapinto out on track, we haven't talked too much recently about Alpine, but I think they're one of the teams that have emerged as something of a dark horse and maybe potentially top of the midfield, I think, heading into the first race of the season. We've talked about the top four, you know, the traditional top four, pulling away from the midfield pack, but Alpine are a team that started developing this car almost a year ago, switched all their resources to the 2026 car. They've got a Mercedes power unit in the back of the car, and I think there is an underlying thing. They've got a very tidy package here and a really good development plan, particularly for the early phase of the year. And I think just talking to their rival midfield teams, they're just really quietly impressed by the job that Alpine have done.
I've been told not to expect upgrades from Alpine for a while, but then they're going to try and implement. We've seen a couple of different styles of upgrade package. Maybe we'll come to that after we watch Oscar have a lock-up. We saw that coming a mile off. Wide at turn one, in a little bit hot, and there we go, backs out of it. So Yeah, there's two different styles, isn't there? There's incremental gains, and then there's wait with what you've got, and then bring a package to try and find a jump at a certain Grand Prix. And I'm expecting Alpine to go for the latter, to keep with effectively this car, get through the early races, figure things out, and then they'll be targeting a race not in the first group of flyaways, to then bring a package to, and then try and bring performance onto the car. But I agree that I think out of the box, there's certainly a team and a car that look pretty handy in that midfield, aren't they, right now?
Sam Collins, the difference between bringing an overall package and incremental gains, how do the teams decide upon their development programs?
I think it's a little bit down to different personalities of different teams and the engineers running it. Some teams do always favour the big package, but what comes with the big package is a big risk, because if you do what Ferrari did in 2024, dump a massive package of parts onto the car, and it doesn't work, you're going to go backwards, and that cost them the Constructors' Championship in 24, and they never really came back from that all the way through their sort of slightly diversionary approach in 2025. Or you could do what McLaren have done for the last couple of years, which has been the most effective upgrade process, which is exactly what Jolyon sort of talked about there, which is the science of marginal gains. Just bring a component. In fact, McLaren took it to a new level. They brought a new component onto the car, they'd try it out, then they'd take it away for a couple of races, wouldn't see it again, play with it some more. Then when it did arrive and actually got used in a competitive session, qualifying or the race, it suddenly worked. So every single part that McLaren brought to the car was effective. And a lot of teams bring new bits to the car and they don't work as expected. The correlation's off on the wind tunnel, or just it doesn't work in the real world as it did in CAD or CFD or just in simulation. That's the real secret to this. Now, McLaren, I'm sure, but nothing's really changed for them. They're going to be able to develop their way up through the field. If they're not in front of the field as they are right now, they shouldn't be, because they've got the smallest amount of wind tunnel time of any team on the grid. And then you look back to Williams and Alpine. We were just talking about Alpine. They should be bringing lots and lots of new bits to the car already, because they've got more wind tunnel time than anybody else on the grid, because they were last year. So I'm a bit surprised to hear from Jolyon there, and I'm sure he's right, that they're not bringing in anything anytime soon. Slightly odd decision, but it does mean what they do bring has to work first time, and that's the risk of bringing the big package. But sometimes when a big package does work, then, you know, it does put you way ahead. But how much have you lost out by not fiddling around at the beginning?
Piastri pushing again on the prototype tyre. Great look on board, seeing him working at the wheel. First gear for the first turn, much like the Red Bull, backs out of it a little bit through turn 12. That looks quite sedate there as he recharges the battery to be able to have the punch then down this long straight. Builds the speed, gets much better traction out of 13 that time as well. And again, you can just hear the engine just struggling that last bit, and again the traction's difficult out of the final turn. And surely this won't be an improvement then for Oscar, fighting it right at the end of the lap. No, misses out by a quarter of a second. Still a tidy lap that would have been ahead of Max, but he's already done better, so no improvement. And yeah, there is just some derating at the end of the straight there for Piastri, particularly into that final turn. But he remains top.
Tidied up that final sector, which is the fastest of the day so far, but lacking a little bit in the first two.
I'm actually amazed the final sector was the fastest of the day because of the way that he was exiting that final turn. You think that's surely not the quickest. It was neat through 13, so he was harvesting energy through 12. That looked suddenly quite easy for him. And then you have a lower approach speed for 13. You still got to pick a braking point, attack that a little bit later, and then get the car turned. It looked like he had a bit more front end in the car. We saw an oversteer snap at turn 4 there as well. So that actually can help your traction, so long as you can turn the car and get the car pointing straighter for when you get the power kick from the electric motor kicking in, and 350 kilowatts of power joining the internal combustion 500 odd horsepower. So plenty going on there for Piastri, and yeah, I'm surprised he must have done a good job through 13, because there's definitely more to come on the exit of that final turn.
Kimi Antonelli in your picture. as he continues on. Nico Hulkenberg is on an out lap as well. Franco Colapinto, Liam Lawson out there setting lap times. Esteban Ocon was in conversation. His race engineer, Laurent Muller, his team boss, Ayo Komatsu, and his teammate, Ollie Behrman. And a guy looking at the data earlier on. And see, he's in 14th at the moment, but he's going to be one, you would imagine, taking advantage of the slightly cooler conditions as the track temperature has dropped down from 41 degrees, currently at 32, and the air temperature is 28 degrees, as we'll get the floodlights in a couple of moments as the sun gets ever lower in the sky, and Crofty and Ant will take you through the final 2 hours of the day. That's splitting the drivers. Behrman earlier on putting 69 laps on the board and a time that now finds itself 2.4 seconds off the pace.
You know what I think Crofty and Ant are going to have the absolute pleasure of? Seeing Lewis Hamilton go through a quali run towards this final couple of hours as well, because he's racked up 43 laps so far today. That's not a lot for a driver that's been in the car all day, but remember, he did almost nothing this morning. But this is the end of Lewis's pre-season, so I imagine he will run a similar program to what Oscar's on, and cycle through some tyres and feel the car on lower fuel, and just do some qualifying sim practice. It was interesting riding on board with Piastri on the end of his out lap there, just to see him get it was his second lap, wasn't it, after he had the lockup, but to see the prep, weaving to get the tyres in, making sure you keep energy in the battery, and then you could just hear, as the mode changed and he went into a qualifying spec, as he crossed the line, you could just hear the pickup of the engine. It suddenly takes off, and it is like chalk and cheese when suddenly you get the power and you're into a quali mode. And Hamilton will need to feel that out. He'll want everything he can as a driver with these new regs. You wanna be on top of it. He's done a longer run, but he wants to, I'm sure, get some lower fuel mileage. And right now, Ferrari are the big team that haven't done that. Piastri, Verstappen, and Antonelli, all with decent times this afternoon.
Esteban Ocon finishing his best lap of the day. Into the active aero, into the straight zone, and over the line for a 1:37.5 as he completes 24 laps in this second session of the day.
I'm also expecting Ocon to do the same as Hamilton, actually, at some point. Maybe they'll keep it all for tomorrow, Haas, but I'm expecting to see a little bit more from them in the last couple of hours. They looked impressive earlier on in testing, in the last couple of weeks, but so far this week it's been so methodical and setup based, hasn't it? Like, they've shelved the idea of going for sort of lower fuel performance running, and that's been a classic Ayo Komatsu thing. Since he turned up, you ignore what Haas are doing in testing, and they're very much set introspectively looking at what they're doing. Don't worry about the opposition. Run the fuel, just dial in the setup. But yeah, I am expecting a little more from them in terms of a run plan later on. Ocon's still circulating on the high fuel though.
I know that in years gone by, Haas have, if they've started the season on the back foot, they've really struggled to try and claw that time back. They're a small team. They've struggled maybe to really understand what the best thing that they can do to try and improve the package. They brought updates quite slowly through the year. Then last year, they really changed their upgrade plan, and they were able to add performance to the car weekend in, weekend out, and that has linked in with since Ayo Komatsu has taken over the team. So I think they've done a really good job, very solid job through pre-season testing to learn about the baseline car that they've got, and then they can set about trying to add performance incrementally, I think, going forward.
Sam, what have you made of Haas's pre-season?
Well, pre-season testing, I've got to hype up the Haas train, haven't I? And Jolan's already done it for me. Actually, I expected a bit more from Haas, but they did have a decent season last year, which means for the first time in a while, they haven't arrived into the start of pre-season testing with a huge amount of wind tunnel time and have a deeply advanced car compared to everybody else. A bit different this year because of that development we just heard about. But also, I think the investment of Toyota into the team is beginning to show through with the way Haas is operating. When you look at the Haas car, it's a very different concept to the Ferrari. Yes, mechanically they're pretty much the same, but the aerodynamic concept between the two cars is really quite different, particularly in terms of the cooling package. And I've noticed today, like they did last week, Haas are mucking about with the cooling system on that car. They're trying different cooling inlets, different cooling outlets, swapping them on and off through the test. There's a high cooling version of the Haas, which I've seen on track today, and then they've tried 2 other versions of the side pod bodywork as well today. So they're trying things. That program is going through, but I really don't think we've seen what they can do yet, and I certainly don't think we've seen what the Ferrari power unit can truly do, other than just keep going round and round and round, unless it's today where it apparently can't.
They're racking the laps up though. They'll cruise past 100 for the day, which is kind of the least you'd hope for in today's world, even with a new set of regs. But Behrman did 69 earlier on. Ocon has done 25 and is still circulating on a long run. Albin on an outlap here, getting ready for what it could well be a longer run. Weaving getting the tyre temp in. Let's see what he's going to dial up.
Yeah, preparing the traditional way, and into the straight zone he goes on the C2 tyre, suggesting a longer run for the driver waiting for his turn. Bit of a correction through turn number 1.
We're seeing that all the time, aren't we? Again, through 2, it's difficult. It's the traction even coming through turn 3. You're still fighting to get your right foot down. We are seeing livelier cars. The turn-in is better. They're sharper, they're more direct. And the drivers are really having to work at the wheel a lot more with the lack of downforce, fundamentally. The shorter wheelbase and the lack of downforce. Which is nice to see. I'm enjoying that aspect of it. Again, little kick of oversteer through the apex there for Albin.
Sam, when the new regulations were first talked about a couple of years ago, did you expect livelier cars to be the one of the upsides of the new regulation set?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, shortening the wheelbase on its own was going to do that. The car's going to be a bit more twitchy with a shorter wheelbase, but also they're lighter. You've got to remember, these cars are lighter than the previous generation of cars. So you've got something that's lighter, still got 1,000 horsepower underneath the driver's foot, and they've got to transmit that in a different way. Those electric motors, you know, they're dumping a huge amount of torque into the rear wheels, and the driver's got to learn to cope with that. So yeah, it's great to see that they're a bit more tail happy, they're a bit more twitchy. I think the word used in the original press releases when it was a couple of years ago now, was nimble, and they really are. So more nimble, more agile, but that also means they're more tricky to drive. And I love things being made a little bit more tricky for the racing drivers who maybe have had it a little bit too easy for the last few years. Now they're having to earn their paychecks. But so are these guys, the engineers. They are really having to work with this rule set. When it was first announced, I was a bit of the opinion this looks a bit too restrictive. The cars look a bit like you've just got to build the car that's in the model and that's about all you can do. Well, I got that completely wrong, didn't I? Because these cars have got so many differences on, and it looks like there's actually so many areas of technical freedom in the technical regulations that you can have so many different solutions. So actually, this is the most fascinating era of Formula One I've seen at least since the 1990s, if not ever.
It's a massive change to change the power unit along with the chassis at the same time, to introduce something that we've never seen in active aero with both wings at the same time. Seen it at different stages of the regulation set. Looking at the Alpine.
Piloted by the 6th best driver from Argentina we've ever seen in terms of points scored in Formula One. Scored a hatful with Williams.
If you missed the trivia round earlier on, we were going through drivers from Argentina, because it's testing and that's how it works. Into the final 90 seconds of our stint. Any final thoughts for us, Lawrence Barretto?
I think what is really great about this stage of testing is, as drivers head into their final stint for testing before they hand over the cars to other drivers tomorrow, is that we're starting to see a pecking order. All throughout testing, teams have been talking about wanting to focus on reliability and understanding their cars and wanting to see what setups they can use. But at last, we are starting to see some teams start to stretch their legs. I still don't think we're going to get a clear pecking order until at the end of testing, but I do think we're going to head into Australia with a better picture about who maybe is looking very good and maybe who's got a lot of work to do. And I think if you look at Aston Martin, you look at Williams, you look at Cadillac, They are probably the three teams with the biggest job that they've got to do heading into the season. And then you've got teams like Red Bull who are maybe outperforming where they thought they were going to be, given the power unit and the strength of the power unit showing throughout pre-season testing.
Max Verstappen with a practice start. Jolyon Palmer, thoughts from you in 35 seconds, please.
I want to start by apologising to the family of Roberto Mirieres, whose 13 points in the 1950s should probably get note as an Argentine driver. And that practice start looked really tricky for Verstappen, didn't it? Trying to find the pre-start revs was not simple. Joining on board was good. I think it's the same direction of travel as we've seen so far, isn't it? Red Bull looking sharp, looking pointy, McLaren turning up a little bit, being fine-tuned on the balance, and I'm looking forward to hearing Crofty and Ant talk about Lewis Hamilton's quick laps coming up later on today.
Beautifully teed up. It's goodbye from us and hello to Betty Glover, speaking to James Fowles.
James, 4.5 days of testing done. Whereabouts do you think Williams are now?
Not first, not last. I know everyone keeps saying this, but it really is hard to tell. But what I can say is that the top four. I think that's pretty clear on what's happening. But that sort of little gaggle of cars behind, of which we're a part of, it's very, very tight. Within a tenth, it's sort of separating 3 teams or so at the moment, from what I can tell. The good news, though, is every time we go out with the car, we're learning and finding a little bit more performance. So hopefully a little bit more to come.
It feels like you're really starting to rack up that mileage. Alex Albon did 50-odd laps this morning. So from the sort of reliability side, how happy are you?
Yeah, I would say really, really happy with that. We did our due diligence. We knew that doing the work that we did back in the UK, which includes that VTT, the virtual track testing, which includes the Silverstone surprise filming day that we caught everyone out with, was a really good way of just shaking out a lot of the gremlins that others would have been doing in Barcelona, and that's proven right. As we've turned up here, we're tyre limited and time limited, so every time the car's turned around, all we're doing is putting fuel in it, and off we go. That's a good car to be working with, and across the last 4 days, and touch wood, across these next 2, hopefully that will be maintained.
And in terms of performance, what do you want to work on, and are you starting to push that now? How does that work?
Yeah, last week was really about just getting the mileage under our belt and understanding how these new power units work. They are very, very complex for everyone. That includes us, let alone the world outside. Making sure we get to grips with all that, just cycling through all the systems, getting used to, there's a lot that's changed this year. It's a new ECU as well. This week was more about, let's start cycling through the setups. What you don't want to do is create a car that's just quick around Bahrain. That's of no interest to us or anyone else. What you want is to understand what each of the setup tools do, such that when we go to Melbourne or Shanghai or otherwise, we're prepared for it. And that's what we're doing this week.
You guys have been obviously working towards 2026 for a while, like a lot of other teams have. What are your expectations? How are you seeing this new season?
It's a good question. I mean, my expectations are that we're able to effectively develop at a rate that is matching those around us or exceeding certainly the midfield cars. That would be the expectation. But as I've described 100 times, I'd love to be saying we're fighting for a championship or fighting those top 4. I think what's really been proven to me more than anything else across this winter break and across the last year is when you change power unit, chassis, ECU, and there's a whole load of other bits changing underneath, it is an incredible amount for a team to take on board. And we simply are not at the level we need to be at the moment to deal with all that in one go. And this year, what proving to myself is making sure that we just start chomping through all of that such that we're getting ahead of it rather than just basically following it.
And you said about the top 4 from last season sort of being the top 4. We're starting to get a sort of an idea of how things are going to be looking. Has anyone stood out to you? You obviously go through a lot of data. Who's looking good?
It really does depend on the day, and there are games being played. Red Bull looked really good until we spoke about their power unit, and they've turned it down quite a bit since then. Ferrari, well done to them. Really, they're coming up with great innovations, and they are moving forward, and I think they are competitive as they are. Mercedes, just because they came out the box really strong, and they've been strong all days, you can't discount them. So what I'm saying to you is even within the paddock right now, depending on what games people are playing on power unit and fuel, it's hard to tell. Then on top of that, I would add that you're going to see more than ever before swings circuit to circuit based on what characteristics of the power unit and the car teams have come up with. So even if today Ferrari could win a race here, that doesn't mean they will in Melbourne.
That's exciting.
It's good, isn't it?
Just a word on Ferrari's rear wing. Have
Yes.
you seen it?
Yeah, very much so.
What do you make of it?
Intelligent packaging inside the end plates. There were pros and cons to it overall. It's worth saying this, and this isn't just Williams, I would say this is teams up and down the grid. Whenever you see something interesting, either it goes into the bracket of we've all thought about it and here's the results and why we didn't do it, or it goes into the bracket of did not think of that, and near enough overnight, within 24 hours, I would expect results to effectively indicate to us whether it's good or bad so we can modify our direction of travel. The rear wing from Ferrari it's an interesting direction of travel, let's put it in that one.
So you had thought about it before you had it?
That one hasn't come across our radar, no.
Interesting, all right.
Not sure it's good yet either, but let's find out.
We will find out, James. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
James Vowles with Betty Glover, and there's his driver Alex Albon on the right-hand side of your screen. On the left-hand side of your screen, Max Verstappen continuing on for what is his 81st lap of the day, and with the second fastest time, 3/10 off Oscar Piastri, and with a 1:32.8. Oscar Piastri, first driver into the 1:32s here in Bahrain this week. Anthony Davidson alongside me. Fascinating interview there with James Vowles, who actually mentioned one thing we haven't really touched upon in the day and a half so far, or day and 3/4, and that's the ECU that has changed. And that's quite a big change from last year. So, as you are our resident professor, shall we talk ECU for 5 minutes?
Yeah, so it's basically the brains behind the power unit has changed as well. Amongst everything else this year, why not throw in a software and hardware change to the brains of the operation? Every road car these days has an ECU that governs the emissions from your car and the way it runs, the way it uses the fuel and combusts that. So all your timing, for example, these days is governed by the ECU. And so the software changed, the hardware needed to change as well. We went from what was called the Tag 300 system to the Tag 700 for this year.
Bigger and better.
Big upgrade, yeah.
Bigger, better, double the capacity.
Well, yeah, so another thing for all the teams to get their heads around. And yeah, like anything, it takes a while to achieve that. So yeah, on top of everything else, they had that to try and sort. So naturally, teams that were further ahead of others in their development and their switch to these 2026 regulations would have had that advantage as well. So that's why these early days are so vital for your championship efforts.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's ECU explained so far. We've covered just about everything else, but if you are just joining us for the first time, we'll go and cover other things. We'll go back to covering other things, I should say, that you may or may not have missed. What you will notice is that since the last time Anthony and myself were in the commentary box, the sun has started to set, and the track temperature has therefore got a lot cooler, and it's gone down by about 13 degrees from the heat of the day. We're at 31 degrees now. Air temperature is at 27.8 degrees. Do you want to tell me something just before I carry on?
Well, I was just going to say, people will inevitably out there be saying, what does ECU stand for? Electronic Control Unit. It's not very fancy, but maybe sounds more fancy just calling it an ECU.
Yeah. EC for you to say. Yeah.
Oh,
come on.
No. Oh, you can tell it's getting late today.
I'll be waiting on that one.
Here he goes.
To be honest, there's a little comparison in terms of best lap times between Kimi Antonelli and Liam Lawson. Liam Lawson is the car just ahead. You can just see it in the distance there of Kimi Antonelli on the track, and that is where the Mercedes is gaining in a massive 1.6 seconds, nearly 1.7 seconds, during the second part of the lap. So temperature's gone down. We're getting to that perfect time of the day to be setting some fast lap times, and perfect time of day for race distance as well, because we race under the lights here in Bahrain, and they will want to go through their simulations and try and replicate the conditions that we'll be qualifying and racing in. Verstappen, Lawson, Hülkenberg, Antonelli and Alex Albon are the 5 drivers currently out on track. In the garage after causing a red flag, Fernando Alonso. Another issue for Aston Martin, stopping on the track. Look, we picked up on this yesterday. There seemed to be a lot of cooling on the side of that Aston Martin. Do we think the engine might be getting a bit hot under there? Is the tight packaging not really helping, and is that adding to their woes, I wonder?
Yeah, and you know, that's why they would have had their car out there in the heat of the day. You said that, yes, we race in these conditions in Bahrain, and we qualify in these kind of conditions as well. So naturally, I guess you'd assume, well, that's your main point of focus. But I think for Aston Martin and many other teams out there, Crofty, you'd be wanting to run in the heat of the day, to expose yourself to maybe temperatures we may see in Melbourne, who knows, or other hotter tracks early in the year that we go to, where you don't want to find out on the day. It's better to find out here and to make those adjustments. But I mean, yeah, I am surprised to see how open they're running that car at Aston Martin already, because it's not exactly like the extreme temperatures we'll see elsewhere. And I can say Miami, for example, is always a scorcher. So yeah, it is a surprise to see it. Is that when you compare it to something like this, the Williams going around now, look how closed off it is around the back of the car, for example.
And look how much lower the side pod is as well on that Williams, which means your radiator position is different. While we're talking cooling on there, your radiator position is much different on this Williams compared to, you know, the Aston Martin. The Williams still got its rake, but the side pods are in a very different position. And
that's why Williams were so keen to stress the fact that they had run their car in some shape or form in the virtual test rig.
Yeah.
And because it still puts the car, yes, in a, you know, it's not the whole car, it's not running around the track physically, but it puts at least that heating element under stress that you'd see on track as well. It's an incredible simulation. What they do these days is, you know, they call it virtual track test for a reason, because it really is. It's a lot of the car. It's the rear. It's the whole power unit. Suspension components. It's the tub. I mean, you even have, by the FIA rules, you even have to have things like mirrors attached to the chassis. Yeah, it's I've seen one of these cars up close on the actual rig, and it's an incredible piece of kit. So at least Williams had that to assess and to run through their own, run their car in a virtual sense on that rig. Yes, they weren't out there in Barcelona, but at least, like James Vowles is saying, here he is on the screen, that they had that benefit or that opportunity to run the car in that way.
Absolutely. On board with Oscar Piastri, who has now joined the action out on the track. And the man with the fastest time so far, that 1:32.861. Fastest time of testing in 2022, by the way, is a 1:31.7 by Max Verstappen.
Yeah, so, you know, like we were saying earlier on, they're starting to get ever closer to that time, and I thought already the 2022 cars they looked pretty rapid. I was standing out on track yesterday, Crofty, and they're still mighty quick as they come towards you. They come over the crest of the hill before turn 9, and the speed just really hits you. It's still, I think, like Jolyon said when he stood at turn 11 yesterday, it still screams F1 when you watch these beasts come towards you.
I've just been stood outside our commentary box watching them going down the straight as well. If you're sat in the grandstand watching cars going in a straight line, you know, they're noisy and they're fast. You know, they're proper speed darts going through the air on that one.
And on some parts of the track, I think, like where I was standing yesterday at turn 9, they're probably approaching there faster than they would have been last year, because you've got that extra bit of electrical energy coming out of turn 8. So Piastri back into the pits. I saw him just changing some controls on the steering wheel there, the X modes. So it's like whenever you want to turn on or off a sensor, you're asked by the team to change these things. Something you can really only do or ideally at slower speed.
Is he going to do a practice start?
And that might have been why he was changing modes to get it into maybe more of a race start sense. So let's see this. Yeah, neutral, and so X mode. Look, so he's turned it on here, turn it back off again. So lots of different mode changes. Yeah, so you do the tens of units on the left-hand side and the single digits on the right-hand side, and then you click on or off. So now waiting for the lights, counting up on the right-hand side of the screen. See, they're off. So now, that might be his like start sequence lights to let him know, mimicking the blue flashing light on the sides. That's what's going on. Get the revs in the right place, and then the revs, the lights were counting back up again, and away he goes. A much better start than what we saw earlier on from his teammate on the actual grid.
Oh, and that was about 12,000 revs.
Yeah, they're going to be.
Before he gets away.
Yeah, that sounds about right. They used to be around 9,000 to 10,000 at the start, and now they're more than that, and obviously for a longer period of time. But fascinating to see the driver changing all the modes before you get going.
Yeah.
And also the fact that he initiated those count-up lights before the actual start lights came on. And when the actual start lights came on, he knew to hold the revs at the right place, and they were the red lights in the middle of his dash.
I love this time of day because we can start to see more on the dash as well and get an indication of what the drivers are doing. Lewis Hamilton's out on track. Lewis Hamilton, last day of testing, because Charles Leclerc is in for the day tomorrow. 45 laps, so this is 45th lap of the session for car number 44, who you mentioned his starts. So just before the lunch break, we had practice starts on the grid, and he got away very well indeed. As we look from 2022 to 2026, and we see that the tyres have got narrower, and we see that the cars themselves, the wheelbase is shorter, the floor width is shorter, the maximum width is narrower as well. And yes, 100 millimeters, 10 centimeters might not sound a lot, but it is a lot, and it's noticeable when you see these cars up close and personal, and when you compare them to a Formula One car 4 years ago.
Yeah, the cars really were getting a bit heavy, a bit big, and yes, you could generate a lot of downforce that way with a bigger surface area to play with. So the aerodynamicists loved it, but they lost their agility. Or were losing their agility more and more as every year went by. So it's great that we're now seeing slightly more agile cars, and I like this trend, and I hope it continues. It always makes me laugh when you see an F3 car or even an F2 car, and you know the driver's the same size, but the car looks much smaller. And you think, just because they're a Formula 1 driver doesn't mean the car has to be massive. You know, why do the junior categories cars look really tiny? And they have the best racing. You know, you watch an F3 race, it's so exciting because you can fit more of them alongside each other. So that's
bigger grids as well, you know. It's
bigger grids,
22 on the grid this year could catch on that sort of thing.
So it's heading in the right direction, Crofty.
It certainly is. And talking of heading in directions, we're going to head down to the pit lane. Here's Bernie Collins. Hello, Bernie.
Hello, Crofty. Yes, I'm down in the front of the Mercedes garage. Antonelli, you can maybe see over talking to Bono, his engineer. They've actually been doing a setup change in this car, and you probably may not be able to see past the wall of mechanics that's lovingly formed in front of the car. But they've changed, and I'll lean on Ant to help explain this when I'm done, but they've changed what looks like the anti-roll bars in the front and the rear of the car. So basically that's a suspension change that they're doing in order to change the stiffness. So how one wheel, so the front right, let's say, reacts relative to the front left. But I'll let Ant go into why a driver might have requested such a change. But the rear's already been done. The front is taking a little bit longer, but all the guys beavering away here trying to get that setup change done before Antonelli gets in the car. And the final thing is just, you can see Antonelli there with his, almost looks like the little tubes you can see around his suit. That's the driver cooling device that they have, that they put in these cars whenever the ambient temperature is over 31. They don't need to be running it now, but it's a good thing to test because they will need to run it at certain events through this year like they did last year. So I'll leave that with you, Crofty, up there in the com spots.
When a heat hazard is declared ahead of the weekend, I think 31 degrees ambient is the magic number. Now, we just saw Lewis Hamilton getting a big snap coming out of turn 4 and heading off into the gravel. Wind's speed not massive currently, a bit unsteady. Liam Lawson in the Racing Bulls going through the final corner. This is Max Verstappen through the first couple.
I think that's the biggest mistake I've seen Verstappen make so far today. I haven't been in the commentary box the entire time, but it is a mistake, but it's relatively small, isn't it, compared to others that we've seen. And I do think that this is where someone like Verstappen, drivers that really minimise their mistakes, Crofty, on any given lap, are going to have the advantage early on this year with these cars so difficult to drive, lacking that downforce that they loved from years gone by. It's a reset for them, and I feel like drivers like Verstappen are perhaps more well equipped to deal with that.
Well, we're looking at Franco Colapinto in the Alpine. You talk about minimising mistakes. There were errors from Franco Colapinto last year. He's not as experienced as Max Verstappen. He's not had as many seasons, not scored as many points, etc. But there were errors from Franco Colapinto, who undoubtedly is quick on his day and is a fine, talented driver. But mistakes do creep in. What Alpine need from him this year is just a solid, error-free series of weekends.
It's almost like in this set of regulations now, particularly in these early stages, where you've got the least grip you're ever going to have with these regulations before development kicks in, it's your duty as a driver to help the energy management in the system as much as possible by giving it a clean set of reference points every lap, because it's learning what you do. It's kind of a bit scary, really, and nothing's changed in that regard. It's done this before. The system's always been learning since we've been in hybrid era of F1. It's always been learning where the best place to deploy its energy is, but obviously it's now more important, it's more impactful. So your duty as a driver is to give it the best case scenario every lap, the best set of data to look at, so it can go, oh, okay, you do that in that corner, do you? Right. That means I'll give you X amount of energy out of turn 8, for example, where Ocon is now. I'll give you maybe a couple of seconds of 200 kilowatts there, and I'll do a bit of regen down towards turn 11, because you're going to give me a lot of regen through turn 10 as well. If you go locking up and you go off the track, or even if you took the corner much better and you carried more speed around that corner, you're messing with the system.
Well, exactly.
So it's not going to like it.
There from Esteban Ocon, that's going to send him off the track.
So while he's doing that, Crofty, he's regen all the time. All that time spent off throttle. Now his state of charge of his battery's gone right up from where he was the lap before. So, and then the system goes, oh, okay, is that how you take turn 11? Is it? Okay, I'll remember that you gain me a whole load of energy in turn 11. So I'll maybe deploy you more next time out of turn 10.
But you don't want that, because you're not going to go off again.
Exactly.
So there needs to be a default kind of GPS setting with this that says, actually, he's gone over the white lines, disregard what happened here.
Oh, he locked the outside front on the curb, didn't he? Yeah.
That was very different to the Lance Stroll at turn 11 yesterday.
Watch the right, just on that curb. It's a serrated curb, so
it's no wonder it's locking up.
Yep. So it's the thing, and I noticed it with the racing balls in the final corner earlier as well, and Verstappen in turn 1, that window of where the grip is, it really punishes you for making a mistake, like locking up the tyre, for example. I don't know, because he got narrower tyres. I don't know if that's because that's the reason why we're seeing the drivers definitely are struggling more on the brakes than I've seen in a long time.
They're arriving at different speeds than they would have done this time last year to various corners. So just on the subject then of the car, the engine constantly learning, and I don't know the answer to this, is that using AI technology throughout a lap and currently assessing and constantly assessing and reassessing? And if it is that the driver driving the car, alone and unaided at all times?
No, it's not AI. It's just. I asked this question actually to some engineers. No, it's just mathematical equations.
Blimey! But who's working those out?
Very clever people.
Okay, right.
Cleverer than you are. Well, I guess it's you're only as good as what you put into the system as an engineer. But there's some serious calculations going on in the background before you even arrive at the circuit.
Flashing red lights from the Red Bull ahead. So super clipping, definitely starting to ramp down
at the end of
that straight.
At the end of a straight, multiple flashes from the red lights is super clipping. Yeah. Wow, look at Piastri getting in a little bit of the turbulence from the car in front of him. Who is that? One of the racing balls?
No, that's his Verstappen.
Oh, it's Verstappen. So this will be interesting. So what was the last lap time of Piastri? 39.5, Verstappen 39.7. So yeah, the big question mark, Crofty, this year is how close can they follow each other?
Well, we might see a bit of this. There's another tenth and a bit that Piastri's gone faster than Verstappen on that last lap, a 1:39.6 from Piastri and a 1:39.8 from Verstappen. They're both on the C3 tyre, although Piastri's are 7 laps fresher currently.
So that's the exit of turn 10. Love these slow-mo shots of the car. You see all of the carbon components rattling around. And it's still a bit of a novelty in these early days, isn't it? The straight mode and the active aero, particularly the front wing. And I love the fact that different teams have got different designs and different concepts that they've come up with.
That is a Cadillac driver about to get into their car. Yeah. Sergio Perez is heading back out again. He's done 20 laps so far this afternoon. His teammate Valtteri Bottas put in 58 laps in the morning session. It seems they are ready for Sergio, but they lost one of the belt buckles. Either way, Lewis Hamilton continues, I say continues around, he's coming into the pits. That's the end of that particular run. As our cameraman,
speaking of running,
runs out of the way. 7 laps he's just done on that particular stint. So Hamilton's coming in for a pit stop and back out again. So is this race simulation then for Lewis Hamilton? If he's done 7 laps, and then they're going to get him off one set of tyres, not onto another. You normally do a few more laps than that on a harder tyre.
Well, I mean, obviously, because of the morning dramas that they had down there at Ferrari, spent so long in the garage, maybe they've had to condense their program a bit. But that was a nice stop, actually. Yeah. Very, very quick. Yeah, that's the second set of hard tyres on, back out there now.
We saw Oscar Piastri putting in a practice start as he came into the pits, drove through, and then stops. That practice start simulation, all the teams are going to be doing something similar with energy management settings today. This is after a discussion between the FIA and the teams as part of their collaborative effort to run system checks today and tomorrow. We've got the new start procedure that they'll do at the end, and there's very much a collaboration between the teams. I think the FIA want to understand what the drivers need to do to get away, so they'll run a few more systems checks. And that'll include mode checks and also straight line, including straight line mode as well, or active aero.
And I guess you've got to test all of these things, haven't you, Croft, to a new set of regulations, stuff like virtual safety car modes and safety cars and red flag scenarios, which we have seen today, actually, a few red flags. And there's another look at that pit stop from Ferrari. They do seem to be the most consistent in getting their car launched out of either the pit box or the actual start grid. It's one of the headaches they seem to not have down there at Ferrari compared to other teams.
See, I'm loath to say this because I don't want to get everyone, all Ferrari fans' hopes up, but they do look in a good place to me, Ferrari. They do look in a much better place than maybe we've seen in testing last year.
I think they've been quite creative. Obviously, you know, the rear wing is the main thing, but then the diffuser as well. I feel like they've pushed pretty hard already with these regs, and that's refreshing to see. Hopefully, for their sake, that pays off. That kind of aggressive approach with their car design, taking those kind of risks. It's what you need to do with the new rules, and you have to hit the ground running. And I think if you can minimise those kind of moments that take up a lot of your time, like the start procedure, come on, it's just getting the car off the line. You only do it once. It could be a race-ending thing right now for some of the teams. So, you know, if that's not taking up your time, your valuable time then is spent with getting the car in a better window, balance-wise for the driver, working on the grip characteristics of through corner balance, that kind of stuff. That's the important bit, surely. And that's maybe one of the luxuries that Ferrari have on their side at the moment.
It's like if you're going to go and play a round of golf and you want to do a practice beforehand, nail your driver on the range within a few shots, then you can go and practice on the putting and chipping, which is way more important.
Yeah, good analogy, Crofty. That's it. I feel like that's where they're on this particular circuit.
Yes.
Where drivability is paramount. Slow speed corners, longer time for the driver off throttle, longer time for the turbo to spin down and cause more of a problem when you get back on power with the turbo lag. So, but you go to Melbourne, way less of a problem. So those advances they have here, it might fade away a bit for the first race of the season.
Talking of fading away, my hopes of a Piastri-Verstappen battle on track have just faded away because Max Verstappen pitted, which doesn't surprise me. He'd done 16 laps on his sets of tyres, so that was the end of those, and he's come back out onto the track once again. He's got Nico Hülkenberg right behind him as we focus on Kimi Antonelli. Currently about to start his second full season in Formula One for a youngster in his rookie year who had his down moments during the course of the summer, but worked his way through it brilliantly well, I thought, and rebounded with some really strong finishes towards the end of the year. Stays fourth fastest, puts in 2 personal best sectors on that lap. I was so delighted by his methodical approach behind the scenes and to working through with his engineers and with his team, what he needed to work on. And he visibly at times last year showed signs of emotion because it wasn't going right for him at all times. But then kind of once the emotion had died down, thought, right, okay, what do I need to do? How can I get this right? Lewis Hamilton currently right behind Oscar Piastri.
Obviously with a massive tyre offset, we saw him come in, put that new set of tyres on. So this is kind of best case scenario, Crofty, for seeing an overtake. And look at that. I mean, that's Bahrain for you, isn't it? Oh, but no, he had to back out of that one.
Oh, this is like Rosberg Hamilton in 2014.
The next duel in the desert.
Yeah.
So, right, where can he overtake? Obviously, what we're accustomed to is, well, he'll just naturally blast past him in the DRS zone.
Yeah.
But we don't have that anymore, because Piastri will inevitably be on straight mode as well when he exits this corner. So where do you overtake? He's clearly got the grip, got the traction. Has he got straight line power to get by? It feels a bit more genuine, doesn't it, than a DRS move?
Yeah.
And gets by him. So a tyre offset in Bahrain. Let's see the lap time difference between the two cars now, and we can start doing our best impersonation of Bernie when it comes to strategy and what you need for an overtake. So
Hamilton was 9/10 faster in the first sector, and then was 6/10 faster in the middle sector when he managed to get past Oscar Piastri.
Well, while we look at this on screen, keep an eye on the timing boards as well for when those drivers we were just watching come past. And Hamilton did a 37.9, it says, last lap round. On my screen, anyway.
A 36.5 last.
His best lap.
His best lap. So 1:37.9. Yeah, you're
Piastri
right.
did a 40.3. No, 40.8.
Yeah.
Haven't got my glasses on.
Do you want to
You
borrow
have?
mine?
No.
It's coming to something when we're both wearing glasses now.
Oh, how old do we sound right now? But okay, so that's the difference that's the difference it takes to see well, you'd have to say a relatively easy overtake.
Yes.
From Ferrari versus McLaren.
Well, like you say, with a massive tyre offset, Lewis Hamilton's tyres currently.
Well, Piastri's got 11 laps on his tyres.
And Lewis has got 2 laps on his tyres.
Yeah, you know, and Bahrain...
It wasn't straightforward and simple. It carried on for a bit before Lewis was able to overtake.
It was, but I don't think Lewis had to resort to pressing boost buttons, and he wasn't in overtake mode either to get that done.
So that would have been the normal deployment.
Yes, yeah.
And the car itself boosting in various areas. when it deploys that energy, not Hamilton having to reach for a boost button himself.
Exactly. So yeah, I think, you know, I'm quite you know, it's early days obviously, but I'm more confident in seeing that play out than maybe I would have been a few days before or even last week, because that is the big question mark, I think, Crofty. How easy, without DRS, how easy will it be for these drivers to overtake one another? I think it's fair to say when they're on the same tyre age.
Well, the same tyre age, it would have been a lot trickier.
And we didn't see that anyway, even with DRS, did we?
No.
If you've got the same tyre age, even a track like this, with a long, powerful DRS zone down towards turn one, you didn't just arrive behind the other car and blast past him in the straight line. That just didn't happen.
You get offset tyre strategies here as well.
And that's where we saw the overtakes happen. Which is exactly what we just saw there, with a 8-lap tyre offset between the two cars. Actually, you know, Oscar's been out there for 12 laps. We don't know how old that set of tyres were before he put them on. To be fair, it could have even been a much older set with 30 laps plus on them. But let's just take it at face value with what we see on our screens. It was 10 laps at the time for Oscar. It was the second lap for Lewis, and he got the job done very quickly. Within, he arrived at the back of him in turn 1. He overtook him on the exit of turn 10.
I don't mind close battles like that. It would be very nice to see. So deploy down the straight, active aero open for Lewis Hamilton, rear wing, and that rear wing is different to the rear wing that we were getting very excited about earlier today. They've changed that for the afternoon session, and then super clipping and the energy ramping down and the speed ramping down towards the corner with it.
Well, the Ferrari's actually doing something different with its rain lights at the moment. I don't know whether they're just testing them, Crofty, because they're just constantly flashing. It's almost as if it's like wet conditions, you know, where the rain lights just flash all the time. So that's annoying, because it limits our knowledge of where they're starting to ramp down and where they're super clipping.
Well, let's have some knowledge then from the pit lane. Bernie Collins, what do you got for us?
She's so appalled at our knowledge or lack of knowledge when it comes to tyre offsets, Crofty. Look, she's laughing already.
I've never seen Bernie Collins appalled.
I know, wait
for
this. So, yeah, go on then.
Thicko to expert.
Yeah. Put us out of our misery, Bernie. Come.
I wasn't in any way going to pick up on your tyre knowledge. I was going to move on to something totally different. I was just going to we can come back to your tyre. You can ask me tyre questions in a second. I was just going to comment on the Aston Martin garage. As you can see, the banners up in front of the garage. Behind me, inside the car on high stands, quite a lot of work going on there. The official line from Aston Martin is they've identified an issue with the power unit, stopped the car as a precaution. They're going to assess that power unit once the car is back in the garage. But to me, from the position standing here, it very much looks like Aston Martin's day might be done. The team haven't confirmed that. That's just a bit of a feeling based on what I can see, and one of the main reasons for that is if you look at their pit wall, it is totally empty. It looks shut down for the day, so I'd be very surprised to see Aston do any further running, but not confirmed by the team. The guys are working at the car, so perhaps, but I think that's finished. Do you want to go to tyre chat now or not?
Well, we could do tyre chat. We like tyre chat, and we're actually looking through a crack in the screens as well. Oh no, the camera's just focused in on Bernie a little bit more. Shame that we could see them working, and then you can talk tyre chat as well. What do you want to tell us about tyre chat?
Well, I think a lot of what you said is right. Bahrain's actually one of the easier circuits, and many are in the previous generation for overtaking. The track is very rough. That leads to high degradation on the tyres. It's generally a multiple stop race, and that means that you can have people on what you said, offset strategies, slightly different tyres. Something in the region of 4 or 5 laps of tyre life here would be enough to get an overtake done previously. So this is a good circuit for testing out that overtaking. And here, obviously, with lots of different run plans and starts of run plans, you get lots of different tyre ages, and therefore we will see here more overtaking than potentially we would in a race. But this is a good track for trying it out.
Bernie, just while we got you here and we're talking strategies, that's obviously going to change for this year. We saw yesterday what we think was a boost overtake pass from Piastri against, I believe from memory it was a Cadillac, maybe it was a Haas. But the point was that in using the boost button to overtake, you're obviously using more energy in that moment. He used 8th gear down towards turn 11 instead of the usual 7th. So the next lap, he got track position, but apparently the next lap he lost 6/10 because of the waste of that energy in that moment of the track. It wasn't optimal. So how on earth do you start to build that into a race strategy for this year? Sorry to throw you in on the spot here, but
I'm just waiting for the McLaren to come by. But this is going to be, there's a lot more unknowns this year. So exactly what you said. The speed of a car can change a lot more lap to lap. We've always had it that a car could deplete its battery on any given lap and therefore be a bit down on power or down on their optimum deployment the next lap. That's always been the case. Now it's going to be a little bit more magnified than that. So I think the strategists, the pit wall, the strategy software are going to have a lot of inputs. Where are cars strong and weak? How much energy have they used the lap before? It's going to become a lot more complicated, a lot more parameters involved. Me and Crofty actually had a chat in the car on the way into the circuit. It wasn't just all music that we were discussing, but we were discussing, you know, a lot of these teams have teamed up with big IT technology partners. Is that to get ahead of this data race, which I think we're now going to see a little bit as teams try and get on top of? It's going to be much more live interaction, a lot more live reaction to what a car has done the corner or the lap before, a lot more for all of the pit walls and the mission controls that they have back at the factory to get on top of. And I think it's going to be much more interesting lap on lap, that live reaction from pit walls that we see.
I can't wait. We were talking about this, and the strategy is going to completely change this year. So we're even more grateful to have Bernie on our team for this year to help explain it all. By the way, President, Deftones, Those Damn Crows and Skindred was the music playlist for this morning in the car. You missed out, Ant.
I just think it's so nice that you find time to talk F1 as well on the way to the circuit. Maybe turn your music off and talk about something sensible.
We had the music on whilst we talk sensible. Hamilton with a little snap there. Now, is that caused by the car in front, or is that just, you know, the acceleration these cars are getting and the snap of oversteer that we're seeing out of some corners, I wonder?
Well, who knows? I hope it's not because of turbulence, Crofty, but what are we watching here with Piastri coming in? Stops.
So look at the revs. Look at the revs that he has to hold.
Yeah, 12,500, which is very close to what we saw, wasn't it, at the start?
Yeah.
That he did at the end of the pit lane. So now it's Piastri's turn to put a new set of the hard tyres on from those old C3s, the mediums. What did he do on them? 15 laps on that set of yellow Pirelli branded tyres.
This is a great slow motion shot.
Look at that, it's still spinning when it goes on to the wheels. Different regulations this year for the wheels, you're allowed to cover them, so you still got spokes on the outside, but then behind those spokes it looks like a solid plate. It is a solid plate for aero reasons. So last year everyone had to run the same wheels, not this year. So it's fascinating to see that again which different designs the teams come up with.
And now the wheel nut's still very much spinning as the tyre comes off there as well. I marvel at F1 pit stops, and I hope we never ever lose that dramatic, you know, short blast of energy from the crew to get those tyres changed and the car sent back out again. It's fabulous.
We talk about the pressure that drivers go under, and obviously I've felt that many a time myself as a driver when it comes to qualifying. It's probably where your heart beats at its highest, and so much is on the line, so much at stake, and we obviously praise them naturally for the job that they do under all that pressure. But the pressure those mechanics are going through when that car comes towards them at 80 kilometers an hour and stops on the pit, and you know how important it is to get that car turned around as quickly as possible within what, 1.5 to 2.5 seconds. The pressure they must all feel, but the elation afterwards if you get it right.
Yeah.
I can't comprehend it really, and I think, you know, everyone deserves the accolade for whatever they do, whatever job they do in F1. But I mean, when you talk about pressure, that pressured environment, all eyes on you, wow, it's not for the faint-hearted.
And also, when a car comes in, it's got a 5-second penalty or 10-second penalty. and the crew just has to get into position and wait and not touch the car, and then the 5 seconds or the 10 seconds is served, then they get to work and the car goes out again. That is always a slower pit stop because they are getting to work on the wheels whilst the car is still coming into its marks, which is why a driver has to hit his marks so sweetly, and how you lose time when they don't hit their marks because you're either reaching for it one way or stretching for it the other. And when the car is stopped and you're kind of there hovering and now you can go, that is always a slower pit stop.
I guess because the stopwatch starts when the car is stationary.
Yes.
But actually the pit stop starts before the car is stationary.
Exactly.
So that's exactly why. It's, you know what, I'd never thought of that before. But they do, don't they? They follow the car in.
Yeah.
And I think that the slow-mo shots we see of, well, of anything to do with Formula One, I love it when you slow down this rapid sport and then you get to see extra detail.
Race simulations in progress all around. Alex Albon, one of those. Let's have a little look here. He's just come out on a new set of tyres, actually. Has Alex Albon, but
yeah, his best laps are 1 minute 35.1, and he's just done on that last lap of 35.5. So another push lap for Albon, and hence why he didn't have straight mode open after he'd crossed the line.
But looking elsewhere, Max Verstappen has now put in 105 laps for today, 95 laps for Alex Albon in the Williams, 97 laps for Franco Colapinto, 86 laps for Liam Lawson, and Sergio Perez currently on his 27th lap of this afternoon session. We just saw Sergio a few moments ago having a moment at turn 11.
Weaving around still. That was interesting, weaving around with straight mode open. And
is that a good idea?
Well, you know what, because if you'd done that with DRS open, you would have spun around.
Yes, it's a bad idea.
Because it moved your aero balance by such a percentage that you just couldn't afford to make those kind of extreme movements. And actually we saw Bortoleto in Brazil.
I was thinking just that.
Spin and have a heavy crash because of an extreme movement going for an overtake with the DRS flap still open. Whereas now, because you relieve the front end of a lot of downforce and drag, your aero balance stays, it still shifts, but it's much more similar. So you can afford to actually move around a bit more. If anything, your aero balance shifts slightly more rearwards, so you get a bit of understeer when you're moving from left to right. But yeah, interesting to see there how vigorous he could be with the wheel with straight mode open.
After having a year out for Sergio Perez, I wonder how much of a difference these cars are, or is his memory that much further back that he's prepared for a relearning process anyway? Do other drivers, I wonder, struggle a bit more getting to grips with these new cars at the start because their memory bank of driving an F1 car is that much fresher in their minds?
I think you always remember, it's strange, you always remember the higher grip that you had around any circuit, so I don't think that ever really leaves you. You know, it's one of being a driver that went from F1 into sports cars. In a way, well, very much in a way, Formula One, it ruins you for the rest of your feet. What's the word I'm trying to think? It's such the car is so powerful, so grippy.
Yeah.
Spoils you. That's the word I was looking for. It spoils you as a driver for anything else you ever drive.
I like ruins.
It ruins you as a driver. It spoils you as a driver because